Welcome to another session in culture and communication. We've had some sessions now on conflict, how different people resolve conflict, the way in which Westerners tend to do it, the way in which majority world people tend to do it. And now I want to bring to a conclusion in these next two sessions some relevant issues with regard to conflict. And today I want to just return for a moment to this chart which we had worked on yesterday. And just to review, very often what happens when people take a win-lose position, that is, they always have to win and then the other people always have to lose, what happens is those around them very often lose a sense of self-esteem and self-worth. And that becomes a very damaging, painful thing for them because it touches at the heart of their humanity. It begins to erode their dignity, and they feel smaller and smaller, and that, of course, is very difficult to handle. So those people very often take a passive-aggressive approach to life conflict situations. Passive aggressiveness is a form of withdrawing or avoidance. That is, it appears that you don't really care, that you're going to be compliant, that you're going to do what you're told, or that you appear that the other person is right and you agree with them. But underneath, you're fighting it. Underneath, you're doing battle and trying to struggle and trying to protect your ego and to survive a little bit. So what happens is that this person really is living a bit of deception. They appear to be one thing when really they're something else. But it's their survival strategy, so it's understandable that they would do this. But as they live in that kind of environment, they become more and more angry. The resentment builds. They become this kind of burning cauldron of acid and difficulties. And so they fight back, but they have to fight back beneath the surface. Eventually they get a point of power in which they can act out all of their aggressiveness, all of their anger, all of their resentment, all of their need for revenge. And at this point then it's open rebellion, and the goal is to inflict as much pain as possible on the person who caused them the pain. So the cycle continues. What I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about now has to do, though, with people who can intervene. Many people are on this track. I think perhaps more young people, younger age, teenagers, early adulthood. But very often there's nobody there to intervene and to give them a different kind of message. A message that says, you're a valuable person. You have worth. You have significance in this life. You have value as a person. But this is where in our churches youth leaders play a very important role. To come alongside somebody and just to say, how are you? What's happening? I'm delighted you're here. Is there something that you're doing this week that I can join you? Maybe some kind of an athletic game or some kind of musical event, or maybe some sort of just walking in the park. Just saying that you're worth my time. I like being with you. It's valuable for us to be together. I enjoy you. Those are all important messages for this person to hear. And what happens is it interrupts their anger. It becomes a time of peace for them. And they realize that the world can be a better place. They realize that there are people out there who will help to build their dignity, nurture them as human beings, and they feel kindness and warmth and just have a good overall feeling. But the youth director cannot do it alone. It actually wasn't the youth director in my case, but a number of other adults who were sort of uncles and aunties to me. And they took an interest, not every week, but maybe once or twice a month. Or while we were at church, they would just come and talk to me and say, put their hand on my shoulder and say, how's it going with you? And all of a sudden, somebody is kind. You know, I'm delighted to see you in church every Sunday. That's such a wonderful, you know, you bless me by being in church. Just thank you for being there. That's all it takes, and we can all do that. And we never really will know that we might be saving a person's life from terrible destruction. And if we are all doing it a little bit, a lot will happen. A lot of good will happen. A lot of people's lives will start taking a different course. So instead of following through on the rebellion, we now begin to feel wholeness and healing. And we then are better able to build a relationship with another person. We're better able to build a marriage that will be peaceful, calm, healthy, whole. We're going to raise children differently than we were raised. Those are good things. And so these little acts of kindness, when we all engage in them, will accumulate to an enormous good for other people, for the kingdom of God. Any comments on this before I move on? Because I want to talk now about forgiveness for a few minutes. It's so important in dealing with anybody who has anger, whether they're in this cycle or whether it's just an anger that's burning somehow. But thoughts or comments? Is anger a common emotion in Russia, for example? How do you see it expressed? Vitali.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I think several writers or philosophers noticed that in the Russian culture, people will keep patient a long time. They'll keep it and patient, and then just burst out with something really big, like revolution, something killing or something, just destruction. There's some culture, you know, like maybe in the South, okay, they're very energetic, enthusiastic, and express their things. And here in our culture, they'll keep it, and that's humiliation is part of the kind of like a cultural whole history. The kings, the invasions. There's this, and people learn to be patient. But under this patience, as it seems like a patience, it's really build up kind of anger, and it build up, and this can burst to the really ugly thing. Like, I mean, that seems like.
I think that would be true in America as well. Some people keep it inside, and then boom, all of a sudden it rushes out and does considerable damage. Yeah. Let me talk about forgiveness then. Maybe just a little bit more about anger and then the need for forgiveness as a way of dealing with anger. Those you are angry with control you. Think about it. If you're angry at somebody, that occupies your mind. It taxes your energies. It's what you think about. You can't sleep at night. You have no peace. The anger that you have towards somebody else actually controls you. And none of us want that. So physiologically, anger produces hypertension or high blood pressure. That's one of the physical effects that's most common. So high blood pressure, just anger built up, the whole system now is working, and the blood pressure goes higher and higher. Socially, anger is expressed through impatience, a quick explosive anger, aggressiveness, such as needing your way, such as road rage, driving your automobile fast and recklessly. Sometimes anger comes out in being competitive. Your need to win, your need to be above or higher or better. So there's a lot of social expressions of anger. And then emotionally, we burn a lot of energy on anger. And anger affects our ability to concentrate. It affects our work relationships. In a moment, I'll mention some others as well, but depression often is a result of unresolved anger. Life just gets heavy and burdensome, and people get extremely discouraged or depressed. And then mentally, when we are angry, we tend to get preoccupied with it. We find ourselves talking with other people or complaining about such a person or this person, how bad things are. We can't concentrate, we can't relax because our mind is still preoccupied with these things, and there's nowhere that we find peace. And so physiologically, socially, emotionally, mentally, these are all problems. Anger starts at a very early age. Researchers have found that as young as 2 years of age, children are expressing anger. 5-year-olds have been known to threaten their teacher in preschool or kindergarten. In fact, here's a quotation. One 5-year-old said to his preschool teacher, "If you don't let us have our way, we are going to get you. We will find out where you live and we will get you." What? You say, where did this come from? Where do you think those words came from? His parents. That's what he heard at home. And he's just replicating what the home environment is all about. But isn't it interesting now that the 5-year-old will stand up to the teacher and make threats and intimidations? What's going to happen to that child when they get bigger and stronger and they can make worse and worse threats and intimidations? I mentioned yesterday a fellow by the name of Richard Fitzgibbons. He says anger is the major and the most common emotion seen in children and adults. Anger. That's his experience as a counselor and as a psychotherapist. 44% of the patients that he sees had anger attacks in the form of depression. So many of the people who are on antidepressants like Prozac or Valium or something have unresolved anger as a cause of it. Now there's a better way to deal with anger than drugs. He said that 34% of all his patients had anger attacks in the form of eating disorders. So anorexia, bulimia, there was an active anger. Anger was expressing itself. Now, I wouldn't have guessed that anger was causing eating disorder, but that's the results of this patient's research and experience. 80% of the patients had a passive anger. That is, they just let it live within them, but it wasn't coming out. But it still has its effect as long as you let it dwell inside of you. Fitzgibbons then, as I noted before, said the only way of dealing with anger in a permanent way, the only antidote to anger is forgiveness. So he says that forgiveness then is the major way, the only effective way of dealing with anger. Where some of this early research came out was in the prisons in America. And in the prisons, they were doing anger management workshops, how to control your anger, how to manage it. But they found out that something in the vicinity of 90% of the people who had anger management workshops